everyone, my name is Mini Sethi. I hope you all are staying healthy. Today we are going to talk about aggregate demand. Aggregate demand is total demand for all final goods and services produced in economy at point of time. Aggregate demand is total demand for all final goods and services produced in economy at point of time. As we know, so many goods produced in our economy. Some are demanded by consumers, some are demanded by businesses, some are demanded by government, some are demanded by foreigners. When we combine the demand of all consumers, businesses, government and foreigners for our country product, it will be called aggregate demand. Now we'll see components of aggregate demand. Aggregate demand mainly have four components: consumer expenditure, investment expenditure, government expenditure and net export. Consumer expenditure includes spending by a household on goods and services. For example, spending on food, clothing, entertainment and transportation. Investment expenditure includes spending by businesses on capital goods. For example, spending on machinery, equipment, building as well as spending on inventory. Government expenditure represent spending by government on goods and services. For example, spending on government projects, spending on public education, spending on defense. And net export, a difference between export and import. And net export shows demand for our nation goods and services by foreign countries. Now we'll see formula for calculating aggregate demand. AD equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Here AD is aggregate demand, C is consumer expenditure, I is investment expenditure, G is government expenditure. X minus M is equal to net export. Here X is export, M is import. When we minus import from export, it will become equal to net export. Net export shows demand for our nation goods and services by foreign countries. So we can say that when we combine the demand of all consumers, demand of all businesses, demand of government and demand of foreigners for our country product, it will be called aggregate demand. Now we'll see factors affect aggregate demand. Disposable income. Disposable income means income available for spending. If disposable income increase, aggregate demand also increase. Aggregate demand influenced by our wealth. For example, stock market gain increase our wealth. As a result, aggregate demand will also increase. Consumer expectation, consumer positive expectation increase our aggregate demand. Interest rate, fall in interest rate increase aggregate demand. Fiscal policy, government policy also influence aggregate demand. For example, government reduce taxes. As a result, aggregate demand increase. Trade, value of export and import also influence our aggregate demand. Price, when price fall, aggregate demand increase. Now we will see price and aggregate demand. On x-axis we have real GDP. Real GDP equal to aggregate demand because both represent total spending and output. That's why aggregate demand equal to real GDP. Y-axis we have general price level. This AD curve represent our aggregate demand which is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. E is our initial equilibrium point. At this equilibrium point, price is OP and aggregate demand is OQ. Now suppose price increase from P to P1. As a result, aggregate demand reduce from Q to Q1. Now suppose price fall from P to P3. As a result, aggregate demand increase from Q to Q3. That means increase in price lead to contraction in aggregate demand, but decrease in price lead to expansion in aggregate demand. Now we will say shift in aggregate demand. As we know, there are so many factors which affect aggregate demand. But when aggregate demand change due to factors other than price, it will be called a shift in aggregate demand. When price is not a reason for change in aggregate demand, there are some other factors that change aggregate demand. For example, interest rate change aggregate demand, government policies change aggregate demand. It will be called shift in aggregate demand. So we can say that when aggregate demand change due to factors other than price, it will be called shift in aggregate demand. Now we will see diagram of a shift in aggregate demand. OP is our initial price, OQ is initial aggregate demand, E is initial equilibrium point, AD is initial aggregate demand curve. Here you can see our price is constant OP, but our demand is increasing from Q to Q1. That means here price is not reason for change in demand. There are some other factor which change our aggregate demand. That's why our aggregate demand shift from, means our aggregate demand curve shift from AD to AD1. This is our new equilibrium point E1. Again price is constant but demand reduced from Q to Q2. E2 is our new equilibrium point. In this case, our demand curve shift backward from AD to AD2. So here you can see price is constant. There are some other factor which affecting our aggregate demand. It will be called shift in aggregate demand. So this is all about aggregate demand. I think you got it, and thank you so much for watching this video. Bye, take care.